So guys, that mic work? Hello, everyone. We're supposed to hold the hand up or something? No, my kids' school, they have to do that. That gets your attention. Welcome. Thanks for coming. So I am the president, or the boss, of Northwest Energy Collaborative, and father of two, snowboarder, beer brewer, green building geek. I'm totally a geek. So I'm passionate about creating a better future for my kids and Will's kids. That's Will. He's my business partner. If he ever decides to have any, we'll see. So thanks for being here. Thank you for the Housing Oregon folks for having us come and speak. We're pretty excited. When we were asked to speak here, we thought, well, let's be really relevant to what's happening today in terms of housing and low-income housing in Oregon, and really kind of across the country. But more specifically, we're here to find the money. Who wants to find the money? Anybody? Find the money. Okay, all right. So find the money is about solutions to ensure that we're building sustainable, amazing homes, well-built, that are profitable, and make it to the finish line. We provide developers and architects, and GCs, and everybody a clear pathway to optimize the energy incentives that are out there. And that's really where we're helping find the money. We have a clear roadmap. Okay, next slide. Let's take a quick look at our agenda. It's going to be fairly straightforward, just some introductions and background about Find the Money. We'll have a panel discussion, and then we will have some questions from you guys, and then we'll have some further exploration from there. So what do you call it when a developer and incentive outreach manager, the VP of a nationally known green building certification program, and a green building consultant walk into a DoubleTree? I don't know, I thought maybe a four-leaf clover. Maybe, I don't know. Or maybe it's just a group of really awesome people that are going to help us find the money. So let's introduce them. So first we have Tricia Paul, the outreach manager for Energy Trust of Oregon Incentives, and did I say that right? Amarna. I never said that right. Amarna Energy. So Tricia, tell me, what's you're on the hot seat here. So you're from Oregon, right?
I'm from Oregon, yes.
What's your favorite outdoor place?
Ooh, the Topple Eagle Cap. Have you guys been to Northeastern Oregon? I was born in Enterprise, so that hike is something we do every year. When my kids were 5 and now they're 23 and 25, so I would say there.
Eagle Cap.
It's the best place to do yoga.
That's where you go. Let's pass it over. Thanks. Mai Huynh Carnes, Senior Development Manager for Community Development Partners. It's great to have you here. Thanks for coming. So what is one fun fact about you?
Oh my goodness, a fun fact about me.
Something.
I was born in France, but I was raised in the Rust Belt.
Oh, there you go. Michelle Foster, the Vice President of Sustainability at Home Innovation Research Labs, the National Green Building Standard Certification. Michelle, thanks for making the trek out here. You're from the DC area.
I am.
What do you do for fun out there?
So believe it or not, what I do for fun is I just started a nonprofit to make the neighborhood I live in more walkable and bikeable. So this was really my model when I started coming here 20 years ago, because you had so much better bikeability. And so that's what we're trying to do in my hometown outside of DC.
Nice. And last but not least, William T. Cashon, and also known as T.O. Willie C. If you listen to our podcast, which is the Energy Podcast. Director of Building Certifications of Northwest Energy Collaborative, my business partner. So Will, you're from Georgia. What's a fun fact about Georgia?
Fun fact from Georgia is that Georgia has the largest exposed piece of granite in the world. Stone Mountain. Google it. It's pretty cool.
Isn't there something about a solar factory too?
Oh yeah, Georgia also has the largest solar panel manufacturing plant in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow.
Which is right near my hometown of Cartersville, Georgia. Q-Cells, pretty cool.
All right, cool, thank you. So let's give them a round of applause and get them all excited. This is not a boring presentation. Somebody's gonna have to send volunteers, yes?
What's your name?
My name is Jonathan. I probably should have said that. I'm telling you now. Jonathan Roble. somewhere. I guess I didn't put myself up there. Who made these slides? So let's start off by next slide. What's the current state of affairs? And I think about this as what's going on with housing. You know, there's homelessness. It's in the media all the time. We have a decrease in socioeconomic advancement. The cost of construction is increasing, and there's a lack of workforce to meet those construction goals. In fact, I just read something about maybe there's every year for the next 10 years, there's projected shortage of 80,000 electricians when we talk about electrification each year. Utility projects falling behind 5 to 7 years. And the executive order was signed by Governor Kotek, those from Oregon here, increasing housing production to 36,000 units per year. Next slide, or click. So let that sink in for a second. So what are the current challenges for developers, for everybody out there to fulfill their mission? And, you know, I was thinking about it and I was like, I'm not going to stand up here and talk. I want to hear from everybody else. So I'd like maybe like 1 to 3 words, and you can just shout it out. Don't be shy and tell me, you know, what's your thoughts? What makes increasing affordable housing difficult? Wait, I heard it. Go ahead.
Land acquisition.
Excellent. Louder. Capacity. Construction costs. Funding. Probably why you're here. Anybody else? Interest rates. Oh God, inflation. Not good. Okay, cool. Well, we made a list. Next slide. That's what we came up with. Pretty much the same things. And what we find about when we think about these challenges, you know, inflation and capital difficult to obtain and construction costs and increasing, you know, really they're all capital related, or at least most of them are, a lot of them are. So what we want to do here is talk about finding the money. Next click. And there's the pink piggy bank. All right. So the next slide. So you've seen green building certifications. Maybe you guys are familiar with some of these. Yes, no, maybe. Okay. So when we think about green building certifications, really finding the money starts with the green building certification. That is the first step. And although all of these make buildings better, they essentially make maybe air quality better. There's some that are higher value, and they're going to unlock those tax incentives. Next slide. And there they are. One more time. So NGBS, Energy Star Partner, will unlocks 45L tax credit. I don't know if you guys know that. And then the super extra super bonus is the zero energy ready home. I never can say that right. Which is got a bonus that adds up to $5,000 per unit if you're building. And then of course, these 3 certifications mixed with Energy Trust of Oregon, right next to me over here, is gonna help. So let's talk about find the money, stack the incentives. So how do we unlock them? Next click. So first, the most important thing, engage a building consultant early in the design process. That's the #1 thing right off the bat. Identify the potential incentive programs. These are the funding opportunities. These certifications are going to help unlock that funding. And then in the end, complete design review and do on-site verification when it's all said and done. So at this point, let's click again. Get thumbs up. Next slide. So let's talk to our panelists now and really go through. You can see there's a list of these credits up here. There's a federal side, 45L, 179D. You guys may have heard of some of these. Of course, the low-income housing tax credit that is administered through the state, but it's a federal program. And then state and local, everything from Energy Trust to Portland Clean Energy Fund has an opportunity. So project funding, next click. Through these tax incentives and loans, we can fill that project funding and create better housing. So at this point, I'd like to talk to this panelists over here that are up here waiting and ask them some questions about their experiences with this stuff. So basically the first question I have for you guys is, how does a green building certification help you finance a project? Who needs a green building certification? Why? Specifically, let's talk about new construction. Anyone? Michelle jumps in.
Sorry about that. So the first thing I want to make sure you understand is two important things. There are energy certifications and then there are green building certifications. In general, an Energy Star or Zero Energy Ready Home is an energy certification. So that's going to yield you a building that has been certified to be more energy efficient. In my opinion, that's always the cornerstone of making a high performance building. You want it to first be energy efficient. A green building certification like NGBS has other attributes. So it's typically water efficient, it's resource efficient, it has better indoor air. So it's addressing those things like wellness. And then typically there are different levels that you can achieve: bronze, silver, gold, or emerald. And as you go up in level, the building is more higher performing. There are a ton of, and the reason we're here, different incentives to help you pay for the level of green or energy efficient that you would like to get and that makes most sense for your project. And that's really in recognition that certain energy efficient features and certain green features will cost a little bit more, particularly at new construction or retrofitting, but in order to incentivize those buildings to being built. So yes, as was mentioned, it always makes sense, in my opinion now in this current climate, to look to do a green certification because of the huge number of different programs that are out there that can help you finance those different levels of performance, levels of energy efficiency. And the first thing would be to start with having a green consultant who can walk you through this very complex landscape. But the first thing that you'd want to do is start by looking at all the different federal incentives that are available. And one of the things that's really important is that they are all stackable. So you can use one or two or all of them. And so it's really important to sort of lay out as early in the process, what is your intention for that project? What are your goals? What do you think that you would like to accomplish? So for energy efficiency, if you're looking to build an energy efficient building, you would want to look at the Energy Star program, working with your green consultants and seeing how your building can meet Energy Star. That can bring you the 45L tax credit. That would be the baseline of where you can start. And you can use that for new construction, or you can use that for a substantial rehab. If you have a multifamily building, you could look at the 179D tax deduction. That also has components that you can use for retrofits or you can use for new construction. And that's going to require different levels, again, of performance, but you can combine them together. So if you had single family homes that you were building that were going to be for rent, for if you're a housing provider, you could use both the 45L and the 179D in order to get those levels of performance that you want. If you want to do EV chargers, there's another tax credit for that. And if you want to do solar renewables, there's another tax credit for that. So really, whatever you'd want to accomplish in your level of performance and your aspirations for that building, you should be sitting down and having that discussion about what are the things that you want to incorporate in the building, and then where is the pool of money there in order to be able to finance it.
Excellent.
Is that a good start?
That's a great start. Will,
I have a question.
Oh, wait.
I've seen the Energy Star label on my refrigerator when I bought it last year. How is that different than this Energy Star
Oh,
label?
you got a pointer or something like that?
Oh, that's a great question. It's actually something that most consumers don't understand, because if they see a home, for example, with the Energy Star label, they often just assume that it means the appliances in the house are Energy Star, and that's not the case. So what it means to be a certified home, whether it's a green certified home or an Energy Star certified home, is that you are going to do a number of things in the building with regard to the thermal envelope, certainly the appliances, making sure that it's airtight, to make sure that that entire building is energy efficient. And it is going to have somebody who goes out to the building, like William, to make sure that the things that the builder was supposed to do, or the GC was supposed to do, actually gets verified that they were done correctly. And this is really important. And I want to make sure I make the point that it has nothing to do with malfeasance on the part of the builders. It's not that they're not trying to do the right thing. It's just that construction proceeds apace very quickly. Contractors will turn over, and it's really important and instrumental in making sure you're going to get that high performing building to have those extra set of eyes to verify that that building actually has the practices in it. The next part is the certification. So then there's a certification agency that's looking over what the verifiers are doing. So in the case of Energy Star, it is EPA. In the case of the Zero Energy Ready Home, it's the US Department of Energy. They provide that certification. And in the case of the National Green Building Standard for NGBS Green, it's Home Innovation where I work. So we're overlooking, overseeing, auditing the verification that's happening to make sure that you know as housing providers that what was spec'd is actually what got built and that you can expect that performance when that building is being operated. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Excellent.
So just like my refrigerator, my building can have an Energy Star rating.
That's right. So actually, you guys keep the mic. So this ties into my next question. So, well, how does the Energy Trust of Oregon Incentive Program align with green building certifications and the Inflation Reduction Act? I mean, specifics, probably Tricia might have some things to say.
Yeah, well, we help, Energy Trust of Oregon is an independent nonprofit, and we only have funding for PGE, Pacific Power, Northwest Natural, Cascade Natural, and Avista. About 20 years ago, the constituents walked down to the Senate and said, let's create an independent nonprofit that'll oversee the way these public investor-owned utilities buy and sell energy in our region, and specifically around energy efficiency. So our program is designed to engage the program early on through an early design assistance meeting, what we call, and we incentivize that up to $6,000 to bring the team together and have a conversation. We might touch on that later a little bit more. But the biggest thing that we provide is energy modeling assistance. So if you do have a building that's outside of the territories that I mentioned, there are other resources available, but this is specific to Energy Trust of Oregon territory. Some of these other resources are what will help you leverage some of these additional fundings. Through our program, when you have an early energy model, which is some, we might get into some case studies here, Will and Jonathan, you do energy modeling. My engineers then take that model and make sure that there aren't any sort of ambiguities. Have you made some assumptions that don't compare? This energy model starts with a baseline building, a code building. Here's what it would look like if you used efficiencies for a heat pump that the code says you're supposed to. And here's your building. It's a lot of work to build an energy model, isn't it? Here's your building with upgraded piece of equipment. You've upgraded your windows, you've maybe reduced your glazing, and your heat pumps are high efficiency. Compare those two models, and it's going to show up with two numbers: an EUI, which we call energy usage intensity, and then kilowatt hour and therm savings annually. This energy model can help owners make design decisions and then move on to unlocking some additional financing, not on just the Energy Trust of Oregon side, because did I mention we pay 60% of the cost of that model?
Whoa, find the money.
That's over half.
Find the money?
To do this exercise, to make decisions, to find out how your building's going to perform every day of the year, and then put some ROI numbers against that. Should I upgrade my windows or should I upgrade my HVAC? Should I upgrade my hot water heater system? A great tool, especially when you're interacting with those that are doing your energy model. Again, 60% of the cost of that. So then you can, from that, achieve an Energy Star certification.
Great.
When you want to
Will?
keep going with it?
So we work with Tricia a lot on these multifamily projects, and I wanted to speak on how the ETO aligns with the Energy Star program. Energy Star has 3 pathways for certification: prescriptive, energy rating index, and ASHRAE modeling pathway. The ASHRAE modeling pathway has almost the exact same requirements as the Energy Trust of Oregon. So if you're doing that preliminary model ahead of time to do maybe a design analysis, figure out what components you're going to use in that building, after you've done that and you decide I'm going to pursue Energy Star, you can use that same model for Energy Star and save on the cost. So, it's kind of like a boatload of savings or opportunity. If you're already doing a lot of this Energy Star work with Tricia on the front end, you might as well pursue Energy Star because you're going to end up saving on modeling. The code in Oregon is very progressive as compared to Georgia, let's say. We're a couple cycles behind. So we're already doing a lot of the requirements that are in the Energy Star certification. So the lift isn't as high as in maybe in the Southeast or something. So if you're already doing it and you're already paying 80% of the cost out of pocket anyway, why don't you pursue that certification to just get the extra funding?
Excellent. Well said.
And then what I'll add to that, which is the perfect building, is once you have done that, if your building is going to be Energy Star certified, for example, you would not have to do anything else from the energy efficiency perspective to earn NGBS Green certification. You would just then have to incorporate the other features to be, again, more water efficient, more resource efficient, make sure that there's an operation manual put together for the building staff. And so it really does, like William was saying, kind of build on that. Once you're already doing that, you're almost halfway there to get the green certification.
Okay. Wow. Get all that? So I'm trying to think to tie in lines with what we're talking about here. How do low-income developers navigate these credits? How do they qualify for these projects and incentive programs?
With these energy sustainability incentives, it just makes it so much more holistic, utilizing ETO, NGBS, and Energy Star. So we're able to sort of layer on these additional tax credit incentives with our investor, and then even with pursuing 45L. So it just makes the gap a little bit less.
Let's talk for a minute about investors, because that's an interesting thing. When we talk about filling the bucket for project funding, there's a lot of talk about ESG lately. Does anybody have any thoughts on ESG and investor funding? I thought Michelle would.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. Just a little bit more than a year ago, our phone started blowing up with all the clients that we had because they wanted to know how they could leverage their NGBS Green certification for ESG purposes. And why was that? And the reason was because interest rates had started to rise. Projects that thought they had their financing all locked down or were looking for financing, all of a sudden were getting shut down, and they were not being able to attract financing anymore. But there was a lot of institutional and international money that was looking to invest, particularly in multifamily apartments, whether it be affordable or market rate. But they had very specific criteria as to how they could invest their money. And they were looking for projects that had ESG goals, so environmental, social, and governance goals. So as you would imagine, the E is a big deal for NGBS Green certified buildings. There are a lot of different things that NGBS Green certified buildings have that check off that environmental box, right? These are buildings that promote being in places that are walkable or not having to rely on automobiles. They're energy efficient. They're better for the environment. There are also a lot of S goals. So if they're affordable projects, for example, and a number of other things. So one of the things that we also did was we created a resource so that if you were going to go and score your building to the National Green Building Standard, it would automatically populate an ESG spreadsheet so that you could see exactly how your building was helping attain those well, mostly E and the S commitments, so that you could present that now to investors who are looking for projects that help them in this way. And so what we have definitely seen is this huge increase in money looking for projects that have these commitments and are really working toward being better for the environment, better for social goals. And importantly, while it hasn't happened yet, the SEC is looking to promulgate a rule so that if you are a public company, it will tell you exactly how you should be reporting on this. And so that will also be a game changer. The rule has not come out final yet. We think it might come out by the end of the year, but we definitely see companies, regardless of having a rule or not, reporting on ESG commitments already. So if you're looking for financing, definitely a green certification can help you chase that kind of money, whether it be institutional or international.
Excellent, excellent. So there's a lot of municipalities and states and cities that have climate action plans. Does the environmental, social, and governance investing, I mean, does that tie into organizations like climate action plans? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
There are, I mean, we definitely are seeing that around the country. It's not so much that they are tying into the ESG commitments, it's that they have very aggressive goals with regard to climate. And this is particularly not only for new construction. We've seen codes, as you all know, kind of go up higher in most places, requiring higher performing buildings, but really taking a much deeper dive, looking at existing housing, which can be a little bit trickier sometimes to retrofit to be higher performing. But lots of municipalities, the city of Chicago, where I live in Montgomery County, the District of Columbia, are adopting these, in the state of Maryland recently, these building environmental performance standards that will be looking to really promote housing that is higher performing, using less energy. And so tapping into these resources, just one way that you can help get the existing housing there.
Love it. Great. I want to backtrack just a teeny bit because I was thinking there is so many acronyms in in our world, right? So I was thinking that maybe you guys can talk a little bit about what's up on the screen, although you can't see it. What are the federal incentives? Maybe a brief little rundown of what you know about the federal incentives and the state incentives. Will, maybe you can take this one.
I'll start us off. So you guys have probably seen all the Inflation Reduction Act seminars. You've been in the past like 8 months hearing about the 45L tax credit that is tied to Energy Star certification, both single family, multifamily. There's the 179D, that's a tax deduction for.
Tell me about the 179D. How does that work? Roughly.
So, okay, so I'm not an accountant, but so the 179D is reserved it was reserved just for commercial properties, not housing, but with the Inflation Reduction Act, multifamily housing, I think starting 4 floors or above are now included. And basically it has a very similar modeling process to Energy Star or the Energy Trust of Oregon. Their baseline right now is just further back. So the baseline for ETO is ASHRAE 2016. The baseline for 179D is ASHRAE 2007. So if any Oregon developer is pursuing the 179D, it's almost a slam dunk because the baseline is so much further behind than our current code baseline. So any new building you build has to be built to the ASHRAE 90.1 2019. But if you're pursuing that 179D, your baseline is 2007. So your model is going to come out pretty well.
Essentially, the way I understand it, the money is it's upfront depreciation is the way to look at it. 179.
And the 45L is a little bit more complicated to acquire. You need like an eligible contractor, a tax credit investor at the beginning, or if you're a for-profit entity and have an appetite for those tax credits, you can take them. But the 179D is it's a transferable credit. So I've worked with energy modelers and commissioners before out in the East Coast, and they'll do, let's say, a garage deck, all lighting remodel for let's say, library or something. The library can't cash it, so they send the check to the commissioner or something, the MEP. So the 179D is transferable and can be syndicated. 45L is a little bit more complicated. What else we got up there?
The GRRP, which is one on the Green Resilience Retrofit Program.
Michelle's got some for 179D.
Okay. The other thing I'll mention that they made a big improvement with the IRA for the 179D is they have a new retrofit pathway to achieve it. And that's where you would be measuring from the baseline. This is for buildings that are 5 years or older. You're measuring the baseline energy efficiency of the building. And as long as you can make a 25% improvement, you can be eligible for that. So that was a great new pathway to achieve that, because previously, as Will mentioned, you had to use that 90.1 baseline. And it was really hard for some buildings to be able to hit that target if they were older. But now just being able to look at the baseline using an energy model, as was mentioned, and being able to get 25% better, you can qualify for that as well.
That's great.
What else we got on
GRRP?
Oh, the GRRP. So the Green Resilient Retrofit Program is it's another new program that came out with the Inflation Reduction Act. It's targeted to existing properties. There are 3 different pathways. They just get more and more comprehensive. The most comprehensive pathway is called the comprehensive pathway. Go figure.
I knew that.
No, so we're doing an application for a project and developer here in town. And part of the process is doing benchmarking analysis of all the tenants and all the owner paid utilities, and a site visit. And you create this report and you apply to this grant funding. I think the next grant application is I think November 1 is the close date. But it's a fantastic program for existing buildings because sometimes there's a bit of a gap on performance. It's very hard to get Energy Star on a existing building. You have to do a gut rehab, go to the studs, do the envelope, all that kind of stuff to get it to Energy Star certified. Whereas sometimes a green building certification, NGBS is a little bit more favorable for existing buildings. If you don't touch it, it doesn't get rated or viewed. But if you do touch it, then it has to be up to NGBS standards. So there's a little bit play there. Maybe you have a little bit more detail on the GRP because you're doing that. Yeah.
So as Will mentioned, there are 3 different levels, but the money can be quite significant. So the middle level, which I'm most familiar with, you would need to get NGBS green certification to qualify for. It's up to $60,000 a unit. So it's a lot. So you'll need to be able to bring your building to get a green certification at the gold or emerald level. So it's a pretty high performance. Plus we have additional, what we call sort of certifications or badges, and you have to either reach net zero energy or a resilience badge. It would probably be much more common to get to that zero energy badge. The resilience badge can be particularly difficult to get to, but nevertheless, this is one of the reasons that I think it's so useful to work with Trish and being able to get the money for the model, because what you'll be able to do is using the model, see what your construction costs or your retrofit costs would be. If you were going to just do a retrofit, not try to go for any of the money. And then you can do the energy model to see how you could improve the performance of that building, help get some money to pay for that, and then do sort of a gap analysis. How much is it going to cost me additional per unit to meet the gold or emerald level at the zero energy requirement? Does that then pay off to go to get the $60,000 a unit? It won't in every case, but in many cases it will. But you've got great information and data now to make really good decisions on the projects that you have and what makes the most sense for them going forward.
Excellent.
I'm so glad to hear that there is a retrofit program. I know that Oregon, I read some statistic that Oregon's online to maybe lose almost 9,000 affordable housing units over the next 10 years. I mean, if you have the exact data, feel free to share that with me, but that's a little scary as those of developers that are putting affordable housing into play. A lot of that's then being taken off the table. So this is fantastic to know this retrofit program. Through our program, the new buildings program, we also service major renovations. So if those preservation projects that you're looking to fund, I know it sounds like there's federal money and I know there's some state money too. We can run that through the same program, through the energy model.
Excellent.
We can find solar incentives and do an early design assistance meeting as well.
Great. Wow.
I see your question. We have like a total reserve time for questions. It will.
But we're gonna get to
We'll
it in 2 seconds.
you'll be the first one.
How was our time, by the way? Doing all right?
I think we're
Okay. I left my watch at home.
What else? Are there? Go ahead.
Oh, you have a question.
Yeah, right. I mean, on the idea of acronyms, I know that working in Oregon with a lot of projects, their sustainability approaches differ. Sometimes there's green communities or there's LEED. I was excited to join this panel because I'd never heard about NGBS. It seems a lot like USGBC, and I've heard of that before. So, and I know through low-income housing tax credits, you are required to get some of these certificates. Maybe, Mike, could you talk about that huge sort of thing where the variance comes into play, which is only what I learned as participating as one of these panelists.
Yeah, that's great. In
Great
fact,
question.
that was going to be one of my questions. That was great. I didn't even have to read it. Good.
Sure. So we have a project that's currently in the city of Portland that's in permitting process. It's a new construction, 12-story CLT, cross-laminated timber, 100% PSH, focused on seniors, BIPOC, 55 and up. So we were trying to make this building as sustainable as possible, exploring OHCS's required certification sustainability requirements, and brought in our architect and consultants to give us an analysis associated with the 3 different paths. We realized that it seemed like they were sort of tying us to these particular paths. And so William and Jonathan, along with our architect and our MEP consultants, were able to introduce us to NGBS to see if it was a possibility to then also layer in all these additional incentives from a financial standpoint. With OHCS, we were able to get a variance, and so we are pursuing NGBS and Energy Star rating associated with for this project.
That's excellent. Can you, next slide, just one more click. Thanks.
I'll add a little bit to that. So MI's project, and we'll pat all of ourselves on the back, is the first NGBS approved project here in Oregon. Traditionally, the OHCS has 3 certification pathways, but Jonathan and I asked, and you can get a variance letter for a different pathway. You just have to prove that that pathway is equivalent to the existing ones. NGBS is listed on, I think, 34 different state qualitative action plans across the country.
Say what that stands for.
National Green Building Standard. National Green Building Standard. NGBS. A lot of
Yes, a
acronyms.
lot of
I
acronyms.
totally agree. There are too many. Just say all the words. Sorry. National Green Building Standard. So National Green Building Standard is listed on 34 different QAPs across the country. It is, I think, an ANSI standard. It is written in code language, so everyone on the project team can understand and interpret it. It is, I'm just running out of facts here.
It's also it's a third
Oh,
party.
It's a third
It's a
party.
third
That's
party.
right. So Michelle is the administrator of the program, but none of the administrators of NGB at National Green Building Standard are allowed to be field verifiers. So I'm an independent third party field verifier. I have QA with Michelle's company, Home Innovation. I have to send in my rough inspection reports, my final inspection reports. They go over the worksheet. They ensure that this project is meeting the guidelines. And then on occasion, we have QAs with them to ensure that our standards are the same. Yeah, it's great relationship between the verifier and the administrator because they just provide us a lot of support. If we have a question on a project, like is the acoustics between walls, does that meet, does it include the floor or the wall, whatever, I email Cindy or Linda over at Home Innovation and they're right back to me and the project just keeps on moving forward. So that's really what's great about NGBS, National Green Building Standard. If any of you guys want to pursue an NGBS project in the state, all you have to do is, well, ask us, but you have to ask Angela at OHCS for the variance letter. It's located on the OHCS website. You submit the application and you just have to have a little conversation, but we have precedent now. So
yeah, and it will probably be changing anyway. We're really hoping, the Public Housing Bureau, and we're working on that, maybe even today. So also just as we're talking here, because then I want to open up to the audience for questions, there is a QR code. If you take your phone, you can actually just take a picture of that and it'll be at the end as well. And it will bring up a lot of information, some other slideshow stuff like stacking credits, because there's so much information and we couldn't share it all in one day. So it's a great resource if you want to take your phone for the QR code. So now, we really want to think about what questions do you folks have? And I don't know, is there a mic back there, or we can maybe bring a mic out? Oh, there's only one mic. All right. Will, you can walk around. Or you can try to yell. I don't know, because it's not that big of a room. Question. All right.
So my question is about the GRRP program. It's my understanding that program, there's some limits to which kinds of properties, subsidized properties, qualify, and some form of a capitalization. You have to have a funding award in order to include that.
So they do have to be affordable, and back to the QR code, we did a very extensive chart because I can't even remember all the specific details, and it'll lay out for you very simply if you want to get that chart. So they do have to be affordable properties. There are 3 different funding cohorts, as Will mentioned. The very first one is you would have to have a recapitalization plan already. So there's going to be a limited number of projects that I think are eligible for that, because if you don't have that, you wouldn't be eligible for that pot of money. The second pot of money is a leading edge. That would be a project where you maybe hadn't thought about green yet, but you decided you want to think about green. You would have to get a green certification and make the commitment to do that. NGBS Green is one of the choices that's available. And for that, you can get up to $60,000 a unit. And then the last one is comprehensive. That's even more money per unit. It's much more extensive. You have to essentially kind of almost turn the project over to one of the HUD selected consultants to help you through that process and let them really come up with a plan for how you're going to improve that building. But that's roughly the 3 different buckets that you get to choose from. Pick which one is yours, and then they pretty much have a different funding application deadline every month. 4 per year for each group, and you could get the dates of those funding applications that are due from that one resource that we have.
I think it's not just affordable, if there is an actual
So the one pager that we have does have all the links back to the HUD website for the individual qualifications. So you'd be able to link back and see the specifics of the program.
Great. Question. Someone had a question over here? He's young. He can run around. Look at him.
Best Phil Donahue impersonation I've ever seen. Let's see. I have a question for Tricia. And you talked about the energy modeling and the savings that you could get up to 60% savings there. And I wanted to know if there is a standard in savings, kilowatt hour and thermal savings that you're shooting for in these models. And if so, does it vary from region to region?
Question. Phil Donahue.
First of all, I want to make it clear that the 60% is to cover the cost of the energy model. So we'll collect an invoice at the end of the process from your energy modeling firm. And you are required to achieve 5% above code. That would be the baseline. There isn't a standard that I see when those energy models come back to me. I see some of them with energy savings at 120,000 kilowatt hours. And, because a therm is measured differently, maybe 2,000 therms. I see projects that are very aggressive, that are exceeding Oregon Energy Code by 15%, 20%. And if you are very, very, very enthusiastic, meeting the 2030 challenge, which is 80% by 2030, you're going to be looking at a net zero design building. I see some of these net zero buildings, or path to net zero is what we call it. So, 80% beyond energy code, and some of them probably fall 70% more likely, and then they're going to use some solar to get them closer to net zero. I see some of those strategies: envelope improvements, heat pump technologies, better ventilation strategies with ERVs, energy recovery ventilators, or heat recovery ventilators. Modeling at saving almost to 500,000 kilowatt hours. So our program does pay 20 cents per kilowatt hour, 80 cents per therm. If you do qualify as a path to net zero, or you're trying to achieve the 2030 challenge targets, those incentives increase. So that kilowatt hour, 20 cents per kilowatt hour, goes to 40 cents per kilowatt hour. And that therm goes from 80 cents to $1.20. Yeah, I think it's important to chat a little bit too about the process. What Energy Trust of Oregon has been servicing projects. I've been doing this for the last 12 years and been able to engage in. And I think it'd be fascinating to learn about your 12-story building. Like, where do you start?
Where do we start? I guess like we indicated before, we brought in consultants early to really discuss and sort of brainstorm with the entire team to see what our energy goals were and how we could then balance that with the overall budget. We pursued NGBS. We have funds from ETO. We are also trying to pursue alternative energy funding to be able to then sort of upgrade our building from MEP perspective and envelope perspective to be able to achieve it. It's definitely a balancing act to see how we're able to achieve these highly sustainable buildings with the constraints with affordable housing funding development.
What I'll add to what Trish was saying is, for Energy Star doing that modeling pathway I was mentioning, her requirement is, for the Energy Trust, is 5%. Energy Star is 15% above your baseline code. So if you're going for Energy Star, you're hitting that 15%. You just blew the Energy Trust out of the water with that 5%. So, if you think about it, like, if you're going for Energy Star, the Energy Trust is a super bonus. It's an awesome bonus. So.
Either way, which one's closer?
Thank you so much. I was wondering what you all are seeing in terms of manufacturing, whether it's like prefab homes, manufacturing homes, whether we're talking HUD manufactured home or the various types of building science that we're seeing come out, playing into and trying to coordinate, market, or, just what's the interplay between that type of housing construction, in addition to, like, you're talking about using CLT, these different materials, of course, a comprehensive energy model like you're talking about, Tricia, would answer all of those questions. But are there any resources being developed where there's a little bit more of a public facing view on how these various products play into energy efficiency, and even make the next leap to what materials and or building types we want to be looking at moving forward?
That sounds like a very architectural conversation. I'm going to pass.
And I can talk to Jen.
Okay, yeah, we particularly don't have any projects exploring that, but we do know there are other affordable housing developers exploring different construction typologies to make it more, I guess, aggressive, associated with being able to produce units quicker.
So from the national level, we don't do manufactured housing, so that I really can't speak to. We have a pretty robust market research division where I work. And what has been frustrating to me is that if you look back 20 years, the modular prefab has been totally flat. Like it just, and I get excited every few years. I've been in the industry my entire life. And then I get sort of disappointed. So we just have not seen, although it seems to have so much promise and it seems like it's going to be a great opportunity. We've got some individual great case studies, but it just doesn't seem to be a market that, or a kind of sector that's growing. And I think there are a number of reasons for that. I think you will see it in places where labor is very expensive. So inner cities, and where you can manufacture the units or the modules fairly closely. So we're seeing in Pennsylvania, for example, there are a number of plants that are in Scranton. They're delivering to Philly. There's union labor. It's a little bit cheaper that way. But other than that, we're just not really seeing that. And not to go into this long explanation, one of the reasons is that there's no cost to building on the site. And there's a huge cost to having that plant. And so the economics often don't end up paying out yet, and don't really make sense. So I'm hopeful, because I think that the construction quality can be awesome and you can get higher performance in an easier fashion, but I haven't seen it yet. So.
But to follow up, the 45L has a cutout for manufactured housing. So there's like, if it comes out of the factory, Energy Star certified, we probably have to go to the factory once a month or something to oversee the process for that third-party verification. But there is manufactured housing, single-family housing, multi-family. So there's a cutout for that if they qualify. You're next.
Hi. Could you talk about some of the opportunities and challenges for layering the state and local incentives, especially PSEF and Oregon MEP, with some of the federal incentives? How do these play together or don't play together well?
That really happens on a case-by-case basis. Some funding you can't double dip, which means you can't pay for the refrigerator from public purpose funds through Energy Trust of Oregon as OR-MEP, because they came from the same bucket. But when we engage, like I mentioned this early design assistance meeting that we support early on, when we're engaging with Will and the project team as a whole, we're identifying how to capitalize from all of those programs all the way through. There aren't programs that fund your energy model, but we do, so we can pay for that. I mean, it really challenges us. I have to tell you, we sit here and go, okay, how maybe more people need to come to the table. The OR-MEP people need to come to the table. The energy modeling people need to come to the table. But at the end of the day, I think it's a useful task. And the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Do you have something to say about that?
Let's see, the question is how you stack them and how they don't play. On the federal level, from what I know right now, outside of like the homes rebate program, because that stuff's still kind of being squared away, you can stack the 45L with the 179D with the 48C. I think 48C is the solar one. Then there's an EV credit that we didn't list, but that one can be stacked, which can also be stacked with the Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac preferred green financing, which can also be stacked with the FHA, I think green MIP reduction, the mortgage insurance premium reduction program. So all of these things can be stacked. For what I know currently, I know that OR-MEP and ETO don't play well together.
Oh, we do.
Well, you can't take one from the, I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes you can't get money from mom, but you can from dad or something.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
they just ask the other. So that's kind of it. Hold on, we had one right here. Oh.
Yes, ETO, we play very well.
Just kidding.
We coordinate all the time on a project.
So yeah, so they're talking. They're talking.
Do these incentives align with affordable homeownership developers? And if so, can you talk about how those pathways for qualifying might be different for a homeownership project?
I mean, I know the federal tax credit does like that net zero home, but Will could talk to that specifically for Energy Trust of Oregon. We have buckets of money. Some are for industrial, some are for residential, and some are for commercial. And I know our residential team has a lot of equitable solar heat pump for homeowners and for renters. So there's some renting solutions there too. But if you go to energytrust.org and click on the residential banner, it's going to drop you down to all those available options for single family. And maybe Will wants to answer the question in regards to federal tax credits for single family.
Are you asking like the credit for, sorry, I'm back here now. Are you asking, can the homeowner cash in on the credit, or is it like for the developer selling it? Again, it's like a case by case thing. These things are like, the accountants are really picky about this stuff. Let's say a developer builds and then sells that home to the homeowner, then the builder can be eligible for that credit, but the homeowner is not. The homeowner is eligible for homeowner credits that have been released, but not necessarily these builder credits. So they're builder developer credits to incentivize the construction. And then on the ownership side, if 10 years down the line, they want to replace that HVAC pump and the incentives are still around or something, then they can go through the home ownership program. And then there's stuff from the Energy Trust as well. So there's like, you just have to, homeowners get one bucket, builders, developers get the other bucket.
I just want to add one quick, hi, my name's Clara Paris and I'm with Enterprise. I just want to add one quick insight on which programs play nice and which don't.
Totally.
My understanding is that 179D has to be deducted from your LIHTC basis, just like 45L used to be. So it still could be a tool that you maybe could use on like a 9% with excess basis or commercial space that you're, doing a rehab of, but on a 4% deal, it's not going to play so nice, Taylor.
Great feedback. Mike's hot. Anybody? Nice, brave.
Thanks. We moved on from NGBS, so I didn't want to bring us back. But since we've only done one here, I would love to hear how this certification differs from like the classic LEED for homes and/or Earth Advantage in terms of its prescriptiveness and ease of kind of working within a project that you want to do.
Okay, so there's a number of ways that I would say that it's different. First and foremost, from the standard itself, as Will mentioned, it's written in code language. And that actually became really important because it was really understandable to anybody on the job site. The HVAC contractor understood what the practice was and how to be compliant with it. Your framer, your insulation guy, like they will understand it because it's written in language that they used to. So that was first and foremost. It was written specifically for residential. So USGBC developed LEED. It's a great rating system, but it was really developed for commercial buildings first and foremost, and then tried to be adapted to residential buildings. The National Green Building Standard was started from the perspective of there were things, the way homes and multifamily buildings are built that are just different. And so we only do residentially used buildings. We don't do anything else. We can certify a mixed use building as long as the non-residential portion is 49% or less of the building. So that real focus on how do home builders and multifamily builders build buildings resonates in the practices when you pick it up and you see it. The other thing that makes it very different is that the certification program was very different. So we started about 15 years ago, and at the time, residential buildings were not earning green certifications from really many of the programs. And so one of the first things that I did when I started was kind of go out and ask why. Why was that? What were all the barriers? And sort of like Avis, I always like to say we had to try harder because we were second. And so we really listened to the very legitimate concerns about cost. Our program is very affordable. Certification fees are very low. Verification that is required is very high, but that was a good thing because it really imbued a very high level of quality. So we qualify, train, test, and accredit the verifiers nationwide to do the verification, but it means that the projects that you're financing and that the architects are designing is actually what is getting built. And so that made a really big difference. Quickness on our feet. We know that you don't have the time to wait around for answers, neither does Will. So we have a 1 business day turnaround. So if you call in and you have technical assistance you need or an interpretation, we will get back within 1 business day, or we will say, oh, great question. That's a little complicated. We actually need a couple of days. So you know when to expect that. And the certification, because so many contractors wouldn't get paid until the certification was issued, we issue within 1 week. So we're a fairly big company. About half the company will work on green at one point or another, and we can pull them in when we need it. So when volume is high and we're getting a lot of reports that are coming in from the verifiers, it's all hands on deck and we're reviewing those things as fast as we can. And when it slows down, there are other projects that they can work on. But being able to turn that around and have it at the closing table or have it when it's in demand really helped. We've seen that particularly with HUD. We are recognized for the disaster recovery funding that they have when they come in and rebuild, and they need that in order for the builder to get that federal financing. And so we've been able to be responsive. So I think those are some of the answers I would give.
Yes, and Carly, when I first heard about this NGBS, I called my colleague Tyler Moffett, who knows a lot about everything that's going on with Moffett Energy Services. And this might get a little technical, or it might make a lot of sense to you, but he told me the difference is now you need to get this Energy Star rating. And I said, well, what's the hardest thing to get the Energy Star rating? He said, a continuous air barrier requirement. I'm like, oh, is that it? Okay. That seemed to be, when I boiled it down, the primary difference between any of the other certifications and this new certification. Now, the process, I think, as with doing anything new, it could be tacky or sticky, but can you talk to that?
Thus far, it hasn't been. It's been pretty seamless. Granted, we're only in for permitting and we haven't started construction, but I think we have a well-seasoned, experienced team on the design side and then the construction side. So hopefully it does go very smoothly. We're very optimistic.
The thing that I think is most important about NGBS is that there's a separation between administrator and verifier. I'm the one in the field looking at things. I'm not also administrating the program. I think that's a big difference with kind of like the local certification program. And that's, I think, really a big attractor to some folks and architects is there's an actual third party independent of everyone else looking over the project.
Oh, he talks loud.
I believe 45L tax credits didn't use to require prevailing wages or days bacon, but I believe that's what they do now. So out of all these kind of credits that we're talking about from GPS, are they all requiring to acknowledge prevailing wages?
Well, you want to answer that? 45L doesn't.
Great question. Great question. So 45L doesn't always require prevailing wage. It does when you're trying to get the bonus. So let's just focus multifamily. If you're a market rate developer trying to do Energy Star and GBS, you're eligible for $500 per unit without using prevailing wage. If you're using prevailing wage, Energy Star certification, $2,500 per unit. Yeah, here's the kicker. If you're using prevailing wage and you get that DOE zero energy ready homes, you get up to $5,000 per unit. So you maybe want to do that, like, where does it meet for me to do this? But you're right. There are prevailing wage requirements for the 179D. For it, you can still get it, but there's a bonus if you use prevailing wage. And I think they did that specifically, So a lot of the projects in this room, people who've done these projects, they are using prevailing wage. You're doing that as part of your funding requirements. So why not try and go for that bonus.
I could add something I just learned a week ago. Davis Bacon prevailing wages check this box. It doesn't have to be bold. So just because it tracks with the department.
Nice. I saw that last week as
Yeah.
well. Nice.
Any other questions out there? This is really fun. Hopefully, now I'm learning stuff right now. Well, if we don't have any more questions, what time? Yeah, this is brand new. Perfect. Oh wait, whoop, there's one over here. Love when people speak up.
There you go.
I'm not quite sure how to pose this, but I've heard some discussion of passive house designs for both single family and multifamily buildings. And I'm wondering whether those standards are different than the standard LEED or green energy building standards. And if so, how they're treated.
Well, I listened to Mike from Walsh, if you all know him. He was doing a presentation up in Washington, and he had this idea that maybe we would look to Passive House to put together a nice envelope, and then we would look to LEED for our sustainable resourcing of materials and indoor air quality pieces of equipment. So my understanding is that there's something really amazing in every single one of the certifications that help move a building more energy efficient and sustainable. Would either of you agree?
So I agree. I mean, it's another standard that we see nationwide it being used a little bit more for multifamily than single family, and in particularly the cold climate zones. It can be a little bit more expensive from a construction technique, and it's a little bit more difficult to do. But it's another good standard to look at, to consider. It's recognized in some of the federal programs, not all of them, for the financing. So that would be another thing to look at depending on where you're looking for your financing.
Yeah, I mean, conceptually, right, passive houses very much just build a really tight envelope building, a box, super simple, minimal openings as possible to try to make that envelope as energy efficient. So then from an MEP perspective, you're utilizing reduced energy to be able to heat and cool that box, so to speak.
Let's do it.
There was a brief mention of the ESG standards and some operational definition of environment and social, but nothing said about governance. I'm just wondering, is there an aspect of that that can be spelled out a little bit more the way the other two components have been?
I'm not the governance expert, but generally the governance is really looking at how that company is really managing themselves. I think what I would recommend most, if that's something you're interested in, is there are a handful of ESG frameworks that have become well used by different organizations. The housing industry in particular is using the GRRP framework. So that is a framework that started in Europe. USGBC, who does the LEED rating system, owned that for a while, but they don't own it right now. But it kind of lays out a framework for what are the different things to do for E, for S, and for G. So that GRRP might be something to look up. You can see very specifically what are the things they're looking for from a governance perspective. But it's not the only one. There's SASB, which is used more typically from single family home builders. There's like 5 or 6. If you literally Google ESG frameworks, you'll come up with the most popular ones.
Okay. Do you need the mic? You got it.
No, yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Did someone speak to the Portland Clean Energy Funds? I don't know if that was.
Oh, yeah, we
covered,
forgot to talk
and I'm not, I see that thing and for like work pensions. So I'm not sure how that.
Really?
Okay,
It's
so
interesting.
we are trying to pursue PSEF. It is a competitive cycle now. I mean, Tanya, you know more than I. You can't double dip, and so we are trying to layer that into the capital stack for our Julia West project. It's considered based on baseline code and anything above and beyond. So that differential between baseline code and what the improvements are is the delta difference of what PSEF is willing and able to fund. And they have different sort of categories and metrics associated with what funding they'll be able to pursue.
I mean, it sounds like we have someone in the audience that might know more too. Oh, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Oh, perfect. We'll all get to learn. That's fantastic. Yeah, great. And I know their website is fantastic.
Julia West House.
And that's serving 80%, 60%.
Oh, it's 100% PSH. So people homelessness coming directly out of homelessness, senior 55 plus singles and couples that are BIPOC focused. 90 units of studios and 1 beds.
Awesome. All right.
Last clicks.
Last clicks. So, thank you. So some conclusions here. I think what we found is that there's a lot of green building certifications. All of them are amazing. Some of them help unlock these tax incentives, but the most important thing of all is to, when you're looking to build or develop, is to start engaging a green building consultant as early as possible in the design process. And then will help identify those potential incentive programs and what's stackable. Also, that QR code that you'll see in the next screen will have a lot of links to helps kind of navigate some of that stacking. So yeah, and then essentially verify and make amazing buildings. I think we have a 4-leaf clover right here. That's what I said earlier. So can we get a round of applause for and all that? So we really appreciate it. As I said, you can look at your QR code or go to our website. There's links to other websites and all kinds of things there to help folks out. And thanks so much for having us, and have a great day. Hopefully we'll be around too if you want to chat, and I'm sure they'll be around for next day or so. So please come meet us. Take care.